Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
So guess what, man? I found a good early copy of Led Zeppelin in Through the Outdoor.
Oh, man, that is cool.
Oh, you want cool? It's a C cover variant with the original bag and an uncolored inner sleeve.
Wow, neat.
Now, even more so, this will blow you away. It's got the EAST, East, on the label, and it's got the strawberry etching, but no RL.
I'm going to just go browse for records. Welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records and about Discogs, I guess. Oh, my God.
Oh, I am going to nerd out on this one today.
The world of Discogs. It's exciting, it's fun, it's confusing, and can blow your mind.
Well, my name's Jim, and I'm a record store owner and Discogs addict.
And I'm Steve, and I am a record collector. But we're just gonna start off right away, like we do every week, to just see about what did you pick up this week, and have you entered it into Discogs yet? So, Jim, what you got?
Well, I had a couple of very interesting things pop up. Let's go first with an upgrade to the collection. You know that I like my promo copies. Mm-hmm. Usually the radio or white label promo is what does it for me, and I'm very happy. But I had a copy of Talking Heads 77 come in, and it's not a promo version. And we're going to get into this when we talk about Discogs in a little bit, but it's got a sticker on the cover denoting it as a promotional copy. I'm going to hand this to Steve and let him read that because it's very cool.
All right. It says, provided with the hope that you will use this for in-store play. Promo copy, not for resale.
So technically not a promotional copy, but it is most definitely something that was given to a record store at some point in time somewhere, and it's now made its way here. So yeah, I like the promo labels, but this one is kind of a fun one to have in there too.
That's great. That's fantastic.
As a record store owner, I approve. The other one that popped up was this very, very interesting Michigan blues artist that I had not heard of. It was brought to me by a friend and customer here at the store. It's John Drendel and B.A. Thrower and Friends is the technical name of the group. And the album is called Papa Never Let Me Sing the Blues. It's 1974. Discogs lists it as blues rock, psych rock. Some of it is pretty much straight up blues, but with that real psych feeling. Now, what makes this very interesting is that this is the only release from these artists, and it's a tremendously rare one. Discogs says that the pressing, it was a private press, was limited to 500 copies, but I found an article from a blog called Rising Storm that talked to the original artists and said that the initial release was just 100 copies of this album. So it makes it a rare one. Discogs prices this thing out anywhere between a couple $100 to $600. I'm going to keep this in the collection because A, I like blues, and B, I like Michigan stuff, and C, I dig the real obscure stuff as well. So we'll let you listen to this here in a bit. But the artists are still alive. I think one is a photographer somewhere, and the other one runs some PR stuff, according to the article that caught up with them after the fact. But it's a very cool addition to the collection, and I'm very interested in digging into it deeper.
That's neat.
Cool. How about you? What'd you come up with?
Well, I recently came back from Puerto Rico, and I've spent 12 years trying to find a record store there, which I finally did find one thanks to a friend who it took me a long time to find it. It wasn't easy. But I came back with rare Mexican cuts of the 60s. It looks like Mexican garage rock. Basically, they take the American songs and they give it their own Mexican garage rock spin. Should be awesome. Corazon Harmonica by Los Morelos, and it's cumbia music from Colombia. And it's a brand new album by them. What I wanted the newer versions of stuff. And so I also got Orquesta El Macambo, and the name of the album is Lluvia con Sol, Rain with Sun, and it's salsa, brand new salsa. And Puerto Rico salsa is king and queen. And so I wanted something new. There was Delvin 666, Secretos, I don't know. It's a punk group from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And that album had just come out that day, so I picked that up. And then there was this, and it was Los Speaker. And now, Maravilloso Mundo de Ingesan. I guess it probably would translates to The Marvelous World of Ingesan. And this is a Columbia Psych album from 1968 that's been repressed. It's pretty bizarre. And, there's a few other things, but those were kind of the main ones because I wanted to, these are pressings from Spain that they got in. For me to order something from Spain here is very expensive. Yeah. So these actually were priced really well. Cool record store, had a great time, and they give you free beer.
Well, that makes it dangerous as well. So is that something I should consider?
I think so. If you want.
I think I may get run into trouble with the city on that one, but you never know. If anyone is curious about your trip to Puerto Rico, they can look your YouTube channel up. You did have quite the time trying to find this store.
I did. It's a pretty fun video, and yes, so please check that out on Steve Carlson Vinyl Community.
So the bigger question is did you get all of these entered into Discogs like a good collector?
I have, and they actually were already listed because thank God if it's not, it is way too much work. I got still one record that's not listed, and I'm just waiting for someone to take care of that for me.
Well, you can always do it yourself.
Yeah.
Well, maybe so. So Discogs, for the uninitiated, if you're unfamiliar with what we're talking about, aside from the marketplace, which if you've been listening to the podcast know that I've been having some issues with, and the other side of Discogs, though, is a database, which is absolutely a tremendous tool for a collector to have at their fingertips. It is the goal of Discogs to essentially have entered into its database every single recorded item in the history of recorded items. And it's not a small task to do, and they're depending upon users of the database to contribute to it. And if that sounds confusing, it's only because it is. Now, I've been a power user of Discogs, Steve, for many years, and I'm always happy to talk about this with folks when they come into the store, especially if they don't know how to get into using this tool. And for purposes of today's talk, let's just kind of ignore the entire marketplace side of things because that's a whole other animal. And let's dig into the database and what it is and how it can benefit a collector for what they're doing. And what I tell folks that are coming in who have never really gotten into it before is that Discogs essentially is going to give you back what you decide, the level at which you decide to put into it as far as what you need. For the novice collector, somebody just getting into it, if they're just looking for a simple way to catalog their collection, they can do this with the very top level of what Discogs is. For the moderate collector, you can dig a little bit deeper into that. And for the super serious collector, or in my case, a serious collector who's also a record store owner who wants to adequately identify pressings, this tool is fantastic.
I did not know about Discogs till about 6-7 years ago, and it's actually when I came to visit your store for the first time, and I couldn't figure out why certain albums were so high when I picked them up for like $5 at other places. And then I learned about Discogs, and I learned about pressings and how that made a tremendous difference in how prices were. And regretfully, most people that find these boxes of records in their garage do not know about Discogs yet because they're pretty sure everything's all valuable and not understanding what a pressing's all about.
And I mean, that can both be a benefit and a detriment, especially though if Discogs allows you to dig deep. But if you use something as superficial as eBay, which is just strictly that selling point, they say, well, I saw this on eBay for $500. And I'm like, well, there's 4 copies there at $3 a piece. Take your pick them all and go sell them for $500 somewhere. But Discogs really allows you to burrow deeply into this idea of different pressings. And not just in our country, but other countries as well. And it does make a tremendous difference as far as the valuation of a record goes.
Yeah, it took me 9 months to put in my first collection into Discogs. You can do CDs, you can do tapes, you can do everything you want, even video.
Yep.
Will go into there. And I mean, it was a labor of love. I mean, every night I would go down and just put it in, and sometimes, oh, wow, that's worth something. Most of the time you go, oh, really? That's it, huh? There can be a lot of disappointment in Discogs, but that's the marketplace.
You talk about it being a labor of love. It is, but it's also a labor. Now, at our store, It's been no secret for those that have been curious and talked to me about this. We catalog everything that comes in with the exception of dollar bin stuff. And that is just very specifically so if I'm selling a particular record, I want to know that this is the correct version because I've got some super serious collectors that come in here. We've got one woman who collects Led Zeppelin stuff, but she only wants them to come from the Monarch pressing plant. So I have to be able to identify and say, okay, this is Houses of the Holy. It's got the MO markings to tell us that it came from Monarch. And I'm cool with that because people collect for the reasons that they want to collect, and I'm happy to help usher them in the right direction as far as that goes. But it does take a lot of work. Holy cow, does it take a lot of work.
And, and if you're a casual collector, or even, you buy music because you just love music and that's all you want, it doesn't matter to you. Get the inexpensive copy. You're going to be happy. It's when you really want to get into the serious collecting and you want to do something. I was looking, if you go into Discogs and you go into Beatles, there's 56 pages in Discogs of Beatles. There is 170,000 items that are for sale from the Beatles. Now, there's 366 compilations of Beatles albums in there. So just pop over to Sgt. Pepper, and here's where this is the tricky part. Sgt. Pepper has 983 different variants. And that's what you have to, if you're a serious collector, get into. Rubber Soul was next at 782, but it is crazy how much is in there, and this is where the insanity begins for many people as they look at Discogs.
We talked about repressings and reissues the other day, and that is how you begin to differentiate, because something like Sgt. Pepper's, there's going to be mono versions, there's going to be stereo versions, there's going to be different cover variations with borders around the outsides of them. It's endless on through there, too. One of the most difficult Beatles albums to catalog and properly identify, though, is the Beatles' Please Please Me, or in the U.S. it's known as Introducing the Beatles. This has the distinction of being one of the most bootlegged copies of an album ever. And that's because the Beatles hit so big and so fast in 1964 or 63 that the bootleggers were kicking these things out almost as fast as the label could. And there's entire websites devoted to being able to tell whether or not you have a legitimate copy or whether or not you have the fraudulent copy, not bootleg, the counterfeit is the word I'm looking for on there. Everything from does George cast a shadow to how much of Paul's hand is showing on the cover to what color the label is, the label borders. It is an exhausting process, but it's one that needs to be done because original, legitimate copies fetch a lot more on the collectible market than the counterfeits do.
And that's why I'm not a Beatles collector. I just couldn't handle all of that. I was looking, just underneath the Beatles, there's 32,000 submissions that are pending just to get in. Now a lot of them, something's done wrong or whatever, but think about that. They already have these thousands and thousands, and there's 32,000 more that think, well, I got a different pressing or something different.
This is both the beauty of and just one of the most maddening aspects of being into that level of Discogs is the fact that people will submit things without understanding. Now, have you heard the term grammar Nazi before?
Yes, I have.
There is such a thing as a Discogs Nazi out there, too. There are people that take this so seriously. They're usually admins or upper-level power users that are policing the database at all times. And if you put something up that's incorrect or even, blatantly incorrect, they're going to call you on it. But even marginally, I've had people, how dare you, this is the wrong thing. You did this per the rules. It's got to be XXXXX like that. And I'm like, chill out, dude. I may have just put something up wrong. But there's a whole underbelly to this database that the user can look at. Even the casual user can look at. But it's even worse if you look at that underside and as far as the confusion level goes. So let me start by just saying, so if you're a Discogs user, somebody who wants it to just track your collection, you can do that by simply finding the copy of your album and finding a version, maybe a US, and clicking Add to My Collection. From there, you can have your entire collection on your phone in the mobile app, And most people, that's going to be good enough to say, I'm calling this up to see, do I have a copy? I don't want to buy duplicates. Do I have a copy? That's the great way to do it. But then you can dig in further into the versions as we talked about from there. But if you are going to be a heavier user of Discogs, I got to tell you, steer clear of the mobile app. The mobile app is good for, I will use the mobile app maybe 1% to 2% of the time that I'm on Discogs. And it's usually only if I'm out and about in an antique mall or a thrift store or a record store and I want to look something up just to see. All the other times I use the desktop, or in my case, the laptop version, which is web-based. And that is far, far superior to the mobile app and gives you a lot more control over what you're doing and how you're using it. So again, it's going to take a little more effort to dig into it because you have to go to a computer to do it instead of the easily accessible phone side of things.
I have it on my phone, and it just takes forever to load my collection up there. And I just get frustrated. It's hard to work with, I actually find. And so I just wind up buying two of the exact same albums. I go home, I had that one already. Oh, well.
Okay, here's your little power secret number one. If you load it up on your phone ahead of time and allow the collection to sync up, then when you call it up the next time, it should be right.
Okay.
So give it time. But the desktop version is primarily what I want to talk about as we go through this for the rest of our discussion today. And if you go to any release, you're going to see what's called a master release. And, we talked about Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor. So let's look at that here. The master release of In Through the Outdoor is identified because on the right side of that page, it will say master release. Now, right underneath that, it says edit master release. Don't ever touch that unless you want to be yelled at by somebody inside. Because if you mess up a master release, they'll call you on that very quickly. So just looking at the master release page, there are 444 versions of In Through the Outdoor listed in Discogs. But that's going to be everything from vinyl to CDs to cassettes to digital files, whatever else that anybody puts in there. Now, as you begin to look at ways to identify the proper pressing in Discogs, I've kind of got this separated up into three means of doing so. One, you look at the album cover. Two, you look at the label itself. And three, and this is the harder part, you look at the runouts and the etchings and the dead wax of a record. So with In Through the Outdoor, for collectors, you should know this, right? There are 6 different cover variations of that album. They're labeled as A through F on there. So the outer sleeve, if you're unfamiliar with this, originally released in 1979, came in a brown paper bag. So if the bag is there, you want that in your collection. But each cover then shows an alternate angle of a scene of a guy sitting at a bar. And each of the covers is from a different vantage point of the 6 people or 6 vantage points within the bar. Very cool concept, but makes it a little difficult for collectors. So when you dig into this, then you have to not only identify what cover variation you've got, A through F, but then you've got to dig in further to check out where the pressing plant was made. And the good thing with the Swan Song, which was a division of Atlantic, or it tied in with Atlantic Records, is that they usually will identify their pressing plants on the label. The MO for Monarch, PR for Presswell plant, S for a Santa Maria, or SP for specialty pressing. I'm sorry, I put in there too.
Yeah.
But these are all made in different parts of the country. So you can begin narrowing down. Now, the Strawberry is an etching. I mentioned that earlier. It's an etching in the runout that has to do with the producer, the technician, the engineer that put that in there. So those are some of the more sought out ones where sometimes the engineer would essentially autograph the etching and that would be recreated in there.
Yeah. And when you look at this, you really do have to start sorting, and there's ways to sort. Again, you want to look at the country. You can sort by, first you find vinyl, you sort by that. Then you go into country, you sort by that. Then you can go and look at, okay, so what is the number of this album on there? Is it an RL 3888? It's just all about defining that search, breaking it down, and eventually you get to the spot where now you have to individually go through, unless, again, that pressing plant, and they write it on some of the albums. They actually will put the pressing plant right underneath the title so you can see it easily. Otherwise, you have to just start punching through to go on down to find it. I mean, for Christmas one year, my wife gave me a magnifying glass with a light just so I could read these run-out grooves. It was just driving me nuts. Hey, you got one.
I've got one
Yes,
here.
yes. Oh, my God. You really have to work at some of that to find out, to get into it, but you have to have it right.
Now, on the master release page for every single release on there, if there's multiple versions, if there's not, you've only got the one. Like that blues album, the Michigan Blues album, only has the one. So that was real easy to put. No, I take it back. There's three. There's a Spanish reissue and a CD version bootleg. So that made it easy to say. But underneath the main notes on a page, a master page, you will find this breakout box that Steve talked about where you can narrow things down. It's a search Boolean type of narrowing down by format, by the label, and then by the country of origin, and by the year. Now, I want to be careful here because with reissues, I get a lot of people saying, well, this is a 1975. I'm like, well, technically it is. If you're looking at the back of the cover, it will give the copyright year of the original. Yeah. Sometimes it'll give the copyright of the reissue. From that point, you can look to see, does it have a UPC code? That barcode is a good tell because those didn't come about until the 80s. Mm-hmm. But even then, not all new records have barcodes on them either. But actually, can I go back to the app? That's one good feature of the app is that you can use your phone's camera to scan a barcode and directly in. But even then, that's maddening because if that barcode is shared by 6 or 7 different releases, you're still in the same boat.
Yeah. And so good points on just trying to find it. But I have found that you got, to try to find the right year, sometimes very difficult, and you can't use that. And a lot of times I won't use that. But once you get in with the numbers do start to change that are on the album as you get, newer reissues.
My process that I do, and I catalog records almost nightly, and I'll go through 30 to 40 to sometimes 100 in the course of an hour or two, is I will always start with the format. And that'll narrow, like say, for example, our Led Zeppelin one. 444, I click vinyl as the narrowing down, takes me down to 237. I'll skip the label because they're all going to be swan song for the most part. I'm going to assume that it's a US, and then it knocks me down to 44 different variations. Okay, so now I'll type in swan song. That'll take me down to 43. This is where it gets interesting because now I can't guess the year because we've got 79, 2015, and 22, but then there's going to be multiples with no year identified in through there. So then I just start looking at covers, or I'll use the open field to type in strawberry or any of the other etchings that I'll see on that release. And that narrows me down even further, whether I put that SP in, and then from there it's just visual.
In most albums, it's fairly easy. You can do this very quickly. But when you say, like a Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, there's over 1,000. There's over 1,000 different types. It's going to take some work. Beatles albums, it is going to take some work. Beach Boys, there's 42 pages of Beach Boys stuff out there. And obviously Led Zeppelin. I mean, those big groups, because they've been reissuing these albums for so many years now, and they're still popular. I didn't look at what Fleetwood Mac would be with Rumors. That must
out there too. Yeah. Can I share with you one of the, and again, stipulating that I've been doing this now for 6-7 years, one of the albums that is the biggest pain in the ass to catalog on Discogs is from the Police.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yes. Now, oh, my God.
I'm handing Steve 4 copies of Synchronicity, 1 personal and 3 from the store. And what do you see there, Steve?
They changed the color. There's 3 color stripes across this. And am I allowed to say bastards?
You can.
Okay. And,
You did.
And the bastards, they sit there. Wouldn't it be fun? Of course, they didn't really think about collectability probably at the time. Let's just change the color.
Back in '83, no. Who cares?
And bet I have one of these sitting. I haven't cataloged because I just haven't had the energy to get and do this. I mean, I kid you not. I haven't even bothered with it yet. It's not put away.
So, the Police Synchronicity, according to the Discogs master page, the album's original cover artwork is available in 36 different variations with different arrangements of color stripes showing different photographs in each of the color stripes. So even if you begin identifying these,
I didn't know about the photos.
in the lingo of Discogs, they're identified by the color. So this one with the yellow is a YBR for yellow, blue, red. But even inside of the YBR, I've got 2 yellow, blue, reds.
Yep.
There's different photos lined up in each of them. So this one is tremendously difficult to really nail down. Even if you can narrow down the country and the pressing, you still have to go through 30 or 40 different visuals to look to see what that is. Now, there's another album, Genesis Abacab, does kind of the same thing. That cover has 4 different color blobs on there. So it's a little bit easier than the Police, but still, you get these cover variations, and it's important to narrow that down if you're doing this.
And there are collectors that collect every single variation, and they're out to find that. And that's great. That's their deal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, man, that would be a lot of Police synchronicity albums sitting around.
See, that's me with the Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor. I do have all of the variations, and each one of them have the bag, so I'm happy about that. But that's the depth I'm going to go on that one. Not going to go that far with the Police.
And now, of course, the big deal with new collecting is variations. How many variations? We talked about that Blue Note 313. Once they get 313 albums, they're making another color from Third Man Records. There's going to be variation after variation. A little easier with color vinyl when they put that than this Police. That Police is extremely difficult.
And this gets to a really great point because it's going to rely on users to submit those. Now, we get a lot of new vinyl releases into the store, and I usually get them on the Wednesday or Thursday before the release day. I use Discogs, the database, as our inventory backup, so I know what I've got. And there are times, 2 or 3 times every week, I'll go to Discogs, and the new releases or the new version is not in there. If I've got time, I'll put it in. If I don't, I find another version as a placeholder, meaning that I'll go find the correct version down the line. But entering the stuff in can be tricky, as we talked about. You're going to get these Nazi types who are going to come down on you, but don't be afraid to do it. Just kind of follow the directions. And there are help spaces on Discogs in their community tab to help you guide you through this. But the easy way to do this is to go to the master release, and if you think you've got a new version, there'll be a add a version or add a release to this, and then you can kind of go through the process. But they're going to want you to put up pictures of the cover. There's a certain order the pictures have to go in. There's going to be spaces for the songs that you have to. The easiest way that I have found in through this is by copying an older release. There's under the edit release button, there is a function called copy to draft, where you copy a certain release to the draft, and then once you work on your draft, you can submit that. But then you just go in and change aspects of your newly found version or new version to whatever.
So how long does it take you to enter in an album?
It really depends. If it's just a single LP and it's a reissue of something, or in many cases I'll find an album, and I have to make sure, because you got to make sure that there's not another version of that in there. If you're adding in something, then it creates this whole ordeal where they have to vote on whether or not it needs to be merged. But if it's truly something, and I'll find these occasionally, something that's not in the system, it will take me probably 15 to 20 minutes with a single LP, and that's including taking pictures, uploading those pictures, and entering in the new information into Discogs. And then I go through and I go the extra step and I add it to the master release. A lot of people don't do that, and there are high-end users that'll go through and scour that looking to add things to a master release.
And so this is why I have this Sumos album that's not in Discogs, and I'm just waiting for someone else to do all of this for me, because I just don't want the Discog Nazis to come down on me.
Bring it into the store next time, and I'll help you with it.
Okay.
Now, there are some other things in Discogs that are very cool that you may not know. Like, let's go to your phone, for example. Back to the mobile. Let's say you're having difficulty deciding, what should I play tonight?
Yeah.
If you go to your mobile app on Discogs and go to the collection and shake your phone, it will give you a random item in there to play.
Some people have done videos on that.
Yep.
They sit there, shake them, and pull those albums out.
Other things, too, you can look at a specific release page, and if you go down to the bottom right, it'll tell you what users have contributed to that. So, I mean, I've contributed, I don't even remember, several hundred things over the years. So I've got a actual contributor rating in Discogs, and then they'll tell me how competent I am at doing that within there. But there's also something very cool. Did you know that at the bottom of release pages on Discogs, there is a comment section? So if you go to a specific release of something, not everything's going to have that, but it's a review section. So if there's questions of a bad pressing, or let's say that somebody says that this pressing has noise on it, there will be a discussion underneath that in the release page talking about that. So a lot of times what I'll do with bootlegs that will come in, or I'm thinking about getting, I'll look for a discussion on there about talking about the audio quality. And there will be users saying, this is a horrible pressing. It sounds like somebody was standing in the back with a tape recorder and you can hear them snoring. Something
Interesting.
like
I was unaware of that. That would have helped me on some albums I've bought, especially get those live albums.
Yep.
And they're terrible.
But again, that's dependent upon the users contributing to this as well. So as long as you know the difference between the master release and then the sub-release pages, you can go through there. The master release pages, the typical user probably, as I said, should not mess with, because those are the high-end Discogs police will keep an eye on those things like a hawk.
Yeah.
And they won't let people mess them up. But I've seen some crazy stuff in there too, where somebody has posted something in a sub-release page, not realizing that that's not the marketplace. They'll add a completely new version release to Discogs, and then in the notes section of their submission, say, my copy is near mint to mint, and it's for sale, contact me, blah, blah, for $50. And then the scolding commences.
Oh, yeah, I suppose that would. Well, again, there's 32,000 Beatle entries just waiting for someone to decide, can they be posted or not?
Yeah, I would strongly recommend. I mean, if it takes time, and I'm not going to say that it doesn't. I have the time because I actually do this for a living. You do something else for a living and you collect on the side. So for me, it makes more sense to be able to dig into it a little bit deeper. That being said, sometimes it does get infuriating. I've got a police cop, one of the police synchronicities that I handed you earlier, Steve. I'm going to call this back up. I put it's not cataloged because it's not in there yet.
Oh, wow.
I actually found a release that is, a version of synchronicity that's not in Discogs. So that's going to take me a good half hour to do, because I'm going to have to make sure everything's lined up perfectly. I even put a note on there saying I'm going to make a video of me doing that just to be able to, show how that's done. So that's down the line somewhere.
That'd be interesting.
But, I love this as a tool. I really do. The marketplace, we won't even get into again. But as a tool, this is indispensable to me.
And especially if you're a deep collector, it's extremely important. It gives you the price of your album, so even for insurance reasons, what your collection's worth. But if you're just buying because, you know what, I like music. This is just what I want to do. I want to get this music. I want to listen to it. You look at Discogs. You can use it to organize, but you don't have to get in deep. Just use it to, for what you want it to be. Don't worry about the pressings.
It is, as I said earlier, you'll get out of it what you put into it. And if you only need a little bit, that's all you need to do. And the effort is minimal at that point.
Yeah.
But
because you can really filter your collections in a variety of ways.
Yes, you can. The one caution I'd give, though, is if you ever decide that you want to sell on Discogs, you really need to make sure that yours is the proper version. Because if there's one thing that's worse than adding in a submission that's incorrect, is attempting to sell the wrong version of something. They will come down on you, and you will get a poor rating if they catch you trying to sell. This was a reissue. This was not this first pressing. This was not a Terre Haute. This was not a Strawberry that you were trying to sell. That's a great way to really get yourself into trouble on Discogs, is by selling the wrong version.
And say, kids, if you decide you're going to sell your collection, it's all in Discogs, you don't come into the record store and expect that, well, look at this. This is what my Discogs collection's worth. This is what I want to get. It is worth that, but you're going to have to sell it by yourself, because you're not going to get that.
Yep, and selling on Discogs is tough, but it can be done. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it at that. But again, I've stopped selling on Discogs for the time being, so that's something for another day. Yep. So are you inspired to go make sure that your Discogs is up to date?
I'm inspired, but not enough to put that one record in or to get around to that Synchronicity album yet. I just can't do it.
So I will make a video about synchronicity and bring yours in.
I would do that.
We'll handle that. All right. As always, you have been listening to two guys talking about records. Actually, it's been Jim just going on because I'm a geek out on Discogs, aren't I?
You are, but it is your business. You should be.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I love doing it. It's fun for me to do. It sounds bizarre, but I really like digging into it.
I don't mind doing it either. I've always enjoyed it. Again, it's that labor of love thing. It's my collection. You feel good.
All right, folks. We hope you have a great week. As always, thank you for listening. Check us out if you're listening to us on iHeart. Check us out on Spotify. If you're listening to us on Spotify, check us out on YouTube.
Yes.
And as always, don't forget to check out Steve's channel on YouTube.
Yep, Steve Carlson, Vinyl Community. And check out Jim's.
Yep, we are RadioWastelandRecords.com or just at Radio Wasteland Records on YouTube. Thanks again for listening. You folks have a great week.
Yep, bye, everyone.